All right, guys, solving proportions. Hopefully after a few minutes of just kind of reviewing and seeing some of the steps involved with solving proportions, all of a sudden everything you did last year in 6th grade will come flooding back, and this will turn into a review rather than feeling like you're learning something new. Because solving proportions is something that you've done. It's something that you've seen quite a bit last year, and I'm hoping that it comes back to you pretty quick. So first thing that I want to discuss with you before you get too far into this is when you're setting up these proportions. Right now in our example, we have x over 6 equals 15 over 2. And the proportion's already set up for us. We've got one ratio equaling another ratio. And we're trying to figure out what x is. We're trying to figure out that unknown piece of this equation. It's not always set up for you. Today, most of them are going to be set up for you, but sometimes you're going to have to be setting up the proportion and deciding where these numbers go. In fact, the next 2 or 3 months, that's all you're going to be doing is setting up proportions, figuring out where the numbers go to set it up correctly. So one thing I want to start right off with is this hint right here at the top, and that's to always keep same units across from each other. So when you're setting up these proportions, you always want to keep the same units across from each other. In other words, if on this side, if x represents apples, and that's on the top, on the other side, our top needs to be apples as well. We can't have apples on top on one side and apples on the bottom on the other. We want to keep our same units straight across from each other. And we'll get more into that later this week, but I have a hard time starting proportions without at least throwing that in there right off the bat. So let's just look at this example. We've got a proportion set up for us, which is what we're going to practice today. We're just going to practice solving it, figuring out what this x is, and then the rest of the week we'll worry about where the numbers go and starting to set them up. So if the proportions are not set up as fractions, we need to set them up in fraction form. And all that means is if it just gives you ratios, then you need to set them up as a fraction. Kind of like down here on the together problems, if 3 books take up 4 inches, it's giving us some ratios. We need to set it up in fraction form. Again, it's already done for you in the example. So that step's finished. Step 2, we're going to go through these steps, and then I'm going to show you a shortcut that'll speed this up for you a lot of the time. So kind of the real process, what's actually going on here is we're setting them up as fractions equal to each other. Step 2 is we need to find the cross product. We need to find the cross products and set them equal to each other. We want to find those cross products and set them equal to each other. So if you remember, cross product is when you take the numbers, they're not straight across from each other, they're at an angle. And we call that the cross product, and you multiply them with each other. So in this case, the 6 is getting multiplied by 15 and the x is getting multiplied by 2. So we're going to actually multiply those together and set them equal to each other. So x times 2 is just 2x, and I'm going to set that equal to 6 times 15. So the 2x is going to go on one side. 6 times 15 is 90. That's going to go on the other side. So 2x is equal to 90. We're going to set those equal to each other. Now we just have an equation. So step 3 here just says now you have an equation. And what's cool about this is you know how to solve equations. You know how to do railroad tracks. You know how to combine like terms and distribute to solve these things. So now that we have an equation, 2x equals 90, we're going to simplify if needed, which isn't going to happen a lot. Usually with proportions, it's already simplified. You just have to do the railroad track thing and solve it, which is step 5. So solve for the variable. And that's going to be your railroad tracks. You can even put that in parentheses if you want, so that you remember what you're doing. So we set it up as ratios. We find the cross products. So 2 times x is equal to 6 times 15. And now we have an equation that we need to solve. So to solve 2 times x equals 90, the opposite of timesing by 2 is to divide by 2. So I'm going to divide by 2 on this side. And on the left, I'm left over with an x. And on the right, 90 divided by 2 is 45. So x is equal to 45. So 45 over 6 is equal to 15 over 2. All right, now that's the real equation. That's the real math behind what we're doing. Last year, you probably learned a shortcut to kind of do this a little bit more quickly. When the numbers are really nice like this, when x is all by itself, we can kind of shortcut what we just did. And the way that you did that last year, over here on the right, I'm going to write shortcut. I don't know if I've ever heard any of you complain about using a shortcut. So the shortcut, first of all, it only works if the variable is alone. Okay? This shortcut only works if the variable's alone. And what I mean by that is there's nothing attached to this x right now. It's just an x. But down here, if you look at some of the problems we're going to do together, in number 4, there's a 2 attached to the x. And in number 5, we've got d minus 2. D's not all by itself. So this shortcut won't work in that case, but it will work if the variable's all by itself. And as soon as I write this down, hopefully 6th grade comes flooding back and you remember some stuff. So the shortcut, the way that you've heard it before and the terms that we usually use is to cross multiply and divide. We cross multiply and divide. So write that down. And what that means is the two numbers that are crossed, like in our cross product, we multiply together. And then we just divide by whatever number is left over. Okay? So we're going to cross multiply and divide. And I'm actually going to show you that right here in number 2 in our together problems. We'll skip number 1, we'll come back to it. X is all by itself. So the shortcut's going to work. So the first thing I look for is what two numbers are crossed, and that's going to be my 3 and my 40. Those ones are what make the cross product. And then I'm left over with this 10 because it's crossed with the x, and I can't really do anything with that. So when I say cross multiply and divide, I multiply my cross. 40 times 3 is 120. And then I divide by whichever one is left over. And it wouldn't make sense to divide by x. So 40 times 3 is 120. Divided by 10 is 12. So x is equal to 12. And that's it. That's the shortcut. We can use it right here on number 3 as well. I've got k over 6 equals 8 over 16. K's alone. So I can cross multiply and divide by whatever's left over. So I can do 6 times 8, and I can divide that by 16, and I get k equals 3. So I can multiply 6 times 8, which is 48, divide by 16. 48 divided by 16 is 3, so k is equal to 3. So that shortcut's really nice when we've got just a variable sitting there by itself. It doesn't matter where the variable is. It can be on the top. Over here on your pause and try, the variable's actually on the bottom. Doesn't matter. You can still cross multiply and divide by the one that's left over to figure out what x is. The problem that you might run into this year, and it's not going to come up a lot, but it is going to happen, is problems like number 4 and 5, where x isn't by itself. Right here we've got 2x on top. So we have to kind of do this one the long way. We've got to actually follow those steps. We have to find the cross product and then set them equal to each other and go through all these steps up here. So step 1 was to set it up, which it already is. Step 2 was to find the cross product. So what I'm doing is 2x multiplied by 15. So 2 times 15 is 30. So this becomes 30x. And I set that equal to 9 times 5, which is just 45. Okay, now I just have an equation. All I have to do is my railroad tracks. I've got 30 times x. Let's divide by 30 to get rid of that. And I come up with x is equal to 45 divided by 30, which is going to come out as either a decimal 1.5 or it's going to come out as a fraction 3/2. Either way, it's equal to either one of those. So it's a little bit more, it takes a little bit more work just because x isn't alone, the variable's not by itself. But really, we're still just cross multiplying and we're still dividing. We just have to be careful what we multiply and divide by. Kind of like number 5, d minus 2. D's not by itself, so I have to kind of do this one the long way. I've got 2 times d minus 2. So I'm going to write that out. 2 times d minus 2. I can't just do the 2 times the d. I have to multiply it by the whole thing. So this is going to actually turn into a Santa hat problem. And that's equal to 5 times 4, which is just 20. So this one, there's a lot more steps involved. Now I've got to do my Santa hat because I've got to get rid of these parentheses. 2 times d is 2d. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. So 2d minus 4 equals 20. And now I've got a two-step equation. So I circle my variable. Hopefully this is coming back to you from a couple weeks ago. I know it's been a little while. I've got a minus 4. The opposite of that is to add 4 to both sides. So now I'm left with 2d equals 20 plus 4 is 24. 2 times d, the opposite of that is to divide by 2. So I've got to divide both sides by 2. And d is equal to 24 divided by 2 is 12. So my variable d is equal to 12. Now this kind of problem you're not going to see nearly as much. Most of what you're going to see and most of what you're going to set up is like number 2 and 3. There's going to be a variable just by itself. However, these do kind of sneak up every once in a while, so I want you to at least have some examples so you kind of know how to do it the long way when you can't use the shortcut. But let's jump back here to number 1, because number 1, the only difference here is it's not set up for us. It says if 3 books take up 4 inches on a shelf, how much space is needed for 26 books? So I'm going to set up a proportion to figure out the space that I need. But I want to make sure I put things in the right place. So I want to set mine up so that books are on the top and on the bottom. So I've got books and I've got inches. So we'll put books on top, we'll put inches on the bottom. And I'm going to set up my proportion. I've got 3 books compared to 4 inches. So that's 3 books on top, 4 inches on the bottom. And I'm going to set that equal to, I'm looking for the amount of space that I need for 26 books. I want to be careful that I put the books in the right place on this side. And my books are on top, so I need to put 26 on top over here. And I'm looking for the inches. I'm looking for how much space I need. And again, this is a nice problem because I've just got x by itself, so I can do my shortcut. I can cross multiply and I can divide by what's left over. So I can do 4 times 26. So we do 4 times 26 and we get 104. And then I've got to divide by what's left. I've got to divide by 3. So I can just do my answer divided by 3. And I get this weird decimal, which we're okay with. In fact, I don't know if I want that decimal. I think I'm going to change this into fraction form because I like fractions a lot better. And my fraction just becomes x is equal to 104 thirds. Or if you're a decimal person, you can put 34.6 repeating. Either one of those work. They mean the same thing. Okay, so go ahead. I want you to pause the video. I want you to try these problems right here. Number 1, you're going to have to set it up. Make sure that you put the same thing on top on both sides and the same things on the bottom. Number 2 and 3, you can go ahead and use that shortcut because the variables are by themselves. But 4 and 5, you're going to have to spend a little bit more time and follow the steps that we outlined today. So good luck. Come show me your work when you're done, and we'll get you the practice for the day.